So, what I'll be doing in these series of lectures is, of course, discuss the Yoga Sutras. Before I get started, I just want to give an idea on what sutras are. So, uh, in ancient Indian literature, we find this really terse body of text claiming to describe vast fields of knowledge, right? Like the Yoga Sutras are like 150 sentences. What it claims to describe is the entire field of yogic effort, so to speak. And Yoga Sutras are dated to around 2500 BC by the modern academia. If I remember what I read in Alice Bailey's Light of Yoga, Light of Soul, that is, what she says is there are native scholars who would date it to perhaps 10,000 BC. That's possible, right? Now, okay. Now, so the question arises: how do you read a body of text such as a body of sutras, right? A body of text that are a bunch of sutras. Um, what what knowledge of Sanskrit do you need? How deep should your knowledge of Sanskrit be? A good way to answer that question is assume you had a perfect knowledge of English and you're faced with a paper on quantum physics or general relativity or special relativity, so to speak, and that text is extremely terse. No matter how good your understanding of English is, it's virtually impossible to make any sense out of it. So, what the modern academia usually doesn't admit is it is virtually impossible to read the sutra body of text without commentaries. It is virtually impossible because there's a saying in German uh, that one can only see what one already knows. One can just read what one already knows. If you're reading a paper on special relativity, what you can read depends on what you already know. With the sutras, it is even more so. So, sutras, there are different kinds of sutras. From my research, what I found is some sutras are meant to be profoundly pondered. Some are designed as pointers, kind of terse hints. Others, like the sutras on grammar, Ashtadhyayi, is virtually code. It has been described as a Turing machine by Encyclopedia Britannica. So, sutras are of different kinds. Yoga Sutras, in particular, are the kind that acts as pointers. One reason this thing might have been preserved like this, perhaps, were an attempt at preserving a body of knowledge through some phase of disaster. When some high civilization fell, like the legend of Atlantis. Of course, the primitive people cannot make up these things. A primitive people cannot come up with still what might be the world's most advanced treatise on grammar. From around the same time as the Yoga Sutras. A primitive people cannot build the Great Pyramid. A primitive people cannot have the aesthetics the ancient Greeks had. And with all that credibility, logic, everything, it was Plato who said there existed, Plato attributing it to Socrates. You know, in the conversations involving Socrates recorded by Plato, it was said that there existed an advanced civilization, Atlantis, and it was from Atlantis that the Greeks got their body of knowledge. And Atlantis sank onto the ocean in like a day or two, in a very short period of time, in a few days. So it is reasonable to think that the body of knowledge preserved in India was preserved across a phase of disaster, right? There were efforts to memorize it. Perhaps it was meant to be preserved even if all written works were lost. So the sutras are extremely terse, designed to be memorized and all that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, let's get to the body of the text. So there is something more I wanted to say. Okay, you can research theories like Tartary and all that, and all these civilizations actually, from ancient India, ancient Greece, Western civilizations, all speak of a flood. There are memories of a flood, there are memories of an advanced civilization before that, and all of them say all of their arts, everything came from those civilizations, because all of these civilizations start with a high degree of expertise in aesthetics, art, grammar, almost virtually every field, medicine, mythology. It is impossible for a primitive people to start like that. Like the oldest monument on earth, the Great Pyramid, is so sophisticated in engineering that we cannot imitate it today. At least not easily. Is it possible for a primitive people to do that? It is not. It is virtually not possible for the people of today to do that. So there should have been a vast system of knowledge before something like the Great Pyramid was attempted. In fact, the newer pyramids are tiny in comparison, and a lot of them are failed constructions. The newer pyramids of ancient Egypt, so to speak. So the Great Pyramid might be from a different era. So we are dealing with a body of knowledge that was dependent on the sciences of a different era. Just like if we were to talk about physics today, the words, the sentences are dependent on a body of knowledge. So there are two ways to approach it. Either you have to have access to that body of knowledge, or you have to know what they are talking about already. So you can map it to reality, so to speak. In Zen, they call it reality reading. You're not reading the text, you're reading reality through the text. The text is just a bunch of symbols offering insight into a reality. Okay? So just as in physics, if your reading is right, it will align with, if your understanding is right, it will align with the way the world works, with observation, so to speak. If it doesn't align with observation, then it's wrong. It's as simple as that. Okay, so now we can get into the body of the text. The first statement says, okay, before that, a bit on my understanding of Sanskrit. Even if I had a perfect understanding of Sanskrit, it is not possible to understand a body of sutras for the reasons I just said right now. The academia pretends they can translate all that stuff, but it were never easy. Even for the ancients, they had to resort to the commentaries to understand the sutras. That is why the commentaries existed. It is not possible to quote unquote just go out and translate it unless you know what the text is speaking about. And if you know what the text is speaking about, you do not need a deep understanding of the language, because after all, it is only meant to be a hint. So my Sanskrit is good enough, and I can use dictionaries and resources to understand what the sutra says, and I can describe what it is talking about to you. So the first statement says Ada Yoga Anushasana. Ada Yoga Anushasana means now the teaching of yoga. That's the way often these sutra texts start, pointing to what will be discussed, what's going to be discussed. Okay, the next statement says Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. The statement literally means yoga is the stilling of something labeled chitta. Okay, now to understand what the chitta is, the ancients had a worldview of a world DNA. It was called the bija, the universal bija, right? It is mentioned in the first sentence of Bija Ganita, right? What was it? Bhaskaracharya says, starts the treatise by saying, I bow to the one God, to mathematics. I bow to the one unmanifest God, to the manifest seed, and to mathematics. That bija is what I'm talking about. So just as the human body is a reading of a DNA, the entire universe is the world DNA getting played out in the world machine, so to speak. The individual awarenesses are involved in that scan. And this scan takes the form of cycles, just as the rotating worlds, the earth is rotating, the sun rotating, the galaxy is rotating. These are different orders of rotation. I have to get into a different kind of physics to explain this, but we will be going off topic. But this is the same structure that appears as the chakra system. The sixth chakra inside the head is a view of the outer sun, filtered through own DNA, which is a sub-DNA of the world DNA, of the universal DNA. So, the experience an individual awareness is gaining, or the experience of experiencing reality, so to speak, is viewing this DNA scan, these DNA scan vectors, so to speak. The chakra system evolving things on a 4D plane might be the reason why the human DNA has a 4D structure, and it is described as code, right? It is code. So that world code is getting scanned. That world code is getting scanned in cycles. In a sense, it is like watching a video game, right? In Nagarjuna's treatise, Nagarjuna, these orders of scan, right? The center points of scan can be thought of as 0 points of different realms, right? So shunyata, that 0 points are what exists in the scan. So in one of Nagarjuna's treatise, Nagarjuna offers an argument against the possibility of an atom existing, the idea of an atom existing. Because if the idea of atom exists, there should be the finest atom. A finest thing should not have a notion of a direction or another, right? So, uh, assume the finest atom exists. It has a left side and a right side still. So the collapse of awareness can only be a dimensional collapse. It cannot be through or dealing with particles as such. The particle phenomenon is an interpretation of what is actually going on in the chakra system plane. It is an interpretation of an inner cycling as the awareness views it, which is why in quantum physics the particle exists only when you observe it, so-called particle exists. When you observe it and it doesn't exist when you do not observe it, that is because you're dealing, the phenomenon is at a higher order scan. It is not that it doesn't exist. So, okay. Nagarjuna also this is not a nihilistic view, right? Because phenomenon also has meaning. What is done in a dream also has meaning. It affects the dreamer as well. That is what Nagarjuna says. So the meaning does not occur in the world machine scan, so to speak. In the teachings of those traditions, the meaning sense of a phenomenon, of a world DNA view, is thought to be eternal. Right? The meaning sense associated with water or wind, like those traditions say, cannot be altered by an act of logic or an act of physical destruction. So the world phenomenon, though it is a world machine scan done by the awarenesses, done by the set of individual awarenesses situated across different planes of reality, cannot be understood in a totally nihilistic way, in an extremely nihilistic way, because action has meaning. At the same time, it is the world machine that is spinning, right? The individual did not make the code, the individual did not make the world storylines. So it is virtually as if the individual were situated in a video game with limited freedom, so to speak. And it is experiencing the world and thinking the world is the observer, right? It thinks, just as when you're lost in a video game, you think everything is real. Right? Whatever is happening in the game is happening to you. In one of the Buddhist sutras, Bahya Sutta, Gautama Buddha tells Bahya, right, when you understand that the scene is just the scene, the herd is just the herd, and so on, and the cognized is just the cognized, you will not abide therein. And when you do not abide therein, you will not abide here nor there, and thereby you'll be free. You can look it up yourself. The idea what I understood is what I just said. The meaning is that the phenomenon that experienced is the whirling of a world matrix. Once the awareness understands that and withdraws itself from it, it is free from it, so to speak. And when the awareness stills that scan by the process of yoga, that is the goal of yoga achieved, which is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Chitta means this DNA matrix system, which is the brain is evolved by the individual human DNA. It is not different from that. The galaxy systems are analogous in structure to the human brain because we are viewing the brain and not the galaxies. The human is experiencing this matrix, so to speak. that the galaxies exist outwardly is an interpreted view, which is why there has been a lot of research coming out saying there's a striking degree of similarity between the neural structures of the human brain and the structures found in the universe system outwardly, galactic planes, so to speak. You can just research that, do a Google on that, you'll find a lot of info. So now the question is basically how do you disidentify with this matrix? You've been lost in a video game, a horror video game perhaps, and you've been lost so much into the video game you think that's real. You suffer with everything that happens in the game, which has virtually next to nothing to do with you, because you did not make the world. You did not make 99.999% of the phenomenon that is happening out there in the world. Yet you suffer with all that, as if you were responsible for it all, so to speak. As if the phenomenon in the game were yourself. Because of this, spin cycles of scan as what exists. Because these spin cycles of scan are what exists, the Heart Sutra says, understand form as shunyata. Shunyata has a very profound definition, again in Bijaganita. So the definition of shunyata has to do with what emerges in awareness when the space vector scans are withdrawn. It uses a highly coded language, Bijaganita. Not a single translation of it has been done. Like, it speaks of dhana and rana. It is translated as translated in a very ridiculous way as gain and loss. Dhana and rana are the dimensional structuring and breaking down. This happens in the world DNA scan, which is why a particle is structured by the awareness and then it breaks down from reality. It exists. The entirety of the structure is not broken down. A plane of scan is broken down. So that's what is going on in the world phenomenon we experience. Okay, so the ancient Indian traditions, they had a view of analytically understanding this, training the awareness to understand this, and gaining powers over the matrix and exiting the matrix, so to speak. Learning to hold the world machine, in that sense, conquering the world machine, and also going beyond the world machine, entering the beyond. That is, the Buddha is called nirvana. And it is also possible to be in the nirvana space and hold the world machine, so to speak. The Buddhist texts speak of that that which is transcended is able to create bodies and appear at will. Right. So, anyway, Buddha's body is thought to have been such a body. Right? Buddha was already enlightened. He made an illusory body and appeared into the world. These ideas exist, are spoken of in different traditions. I do not know if it is from the original sutras, the original 3 baskets. I haven't researched it in depth, but these ideas exist. Even in the Yogasutras, the being that has transcended phenomena or is transcending, when the awareness begins to free itself, is able to understand phenomena, it is able to wield powers over it. That is described. That is described definitely in the Theravada text, the original text of Buddhism. Through a process of jhana, you gain, say, powers over the water element or earth element. The goal is not to gain powers. Through the process of jhana or focused meditation, uh, which is analogous to the samadhi and vipassana, or the samadhi and vipassana of the Buddhists are analogous to the samadhi and samyama of the Yogasutras. The idea is when the awareness focuses, it gains understanding of what is focused on, and that is called samadhi, being one with the phenomenon. Usually, that which is focused on needs to be an inner phenomenon and is held in such a way that it is one's own frame, and holding that frame sense, so going internally as well and encompassing the entire space of one's awareness, so the entire universe phenomenon. So holding the inner sign of the water element. So inner sign is the inner view that appears. For earth, it is said to be like marble. For water, it is said to be like crystals. One gains powers over it, so to speak. The goal of that meditation is not to gain powers, but to gain prowess in samadhi, focused meditation. Once you've done focused meditation on something, it is then possible to approach it again in an analytical way. Right? In analysis, the mind is moving and analyzing different parts, breaking the phenomenon down into parts. What is it made of? How is it moving? That is vipassana. Vipassana means vipassana, to perceive. Pasana, vi means in parts. Some means together, ati means coming together. The awareness coming together. So in Yoga Sutras, it is there. The same thing. Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And dharana is like when the mind is in a more moving sense, in a more dynamic sense on the object, which has to be an inner object, as per the Buddhists. As per Buddhist traditions that I have explored. Dharana, dhyana are more dynamic, while samadhi is in a sense one is absorbed into that which is meditated on. In a way, Yoga Sutras describe it as Swarupa Shunyam, meaning you could understand it in one way as it is that which is meditated on becomes own form. We'll get into a deeper exploration of that. Perhaps a deeper understanding of it is also needed, rather than what I said might have suggested. There are Buddhist traditions which speak of a dynamic which speak of a more dynamic process where samadhi and vipassana run together. So the goal of all these meditations is to finally understand what is the world phenomenon and what is the self, what is not the world phenomenon. The Heart Sutra says the world phenomenon is devoid of soul nature, right? Self nature. Buddhism does not deny soul or self. Buddhism only says, in debate with some scholars of that era who spoke of a monolithic, unaltering self, which is all pervading, and that being all a phenomenon. Buddhism said it does not seem so on analysis, because when we perceive things, there is something inwardly altering. Perception is dependent on these altering outward vectors. So there are things altering, so to speak. When the Heart Sutra says form is the aggregates are devoid of self, it means the outer form is devoid, just like the video game is devoid of the self. It is being held by the self. once the self realizes it is not that thing, it can free itself from it, so to speak. So again, yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta vritti is the world machine scan cycles, the ability to still those cycles happening in own awareness, disidentify with it and remove oneself from it is yoga. And what I describe that phrase as, that description being accurate or at least in the right direction, is suggested by the next phrase, which says tada drashtu swarube avasthanam. Tada means then, drashtu means observer, drashtuhu, swarube avasthanam. Swarube means own form, avasthanam means established. Then the observer is established in own form. You exited from that virtual reality video game and sees your own form, which is in fact beyond the world phenomenon, beyond the universe. So of course there are individual awarenesses experiencing this. Now the next sentence says vritti sarupyam itaradara. The text then goes on to describe what are the forms of the vritti. It's just a way of assigning labels so that one might analyze it, like inferential thought. Inferential thought. This happened. An inferential view, that is, a phenomenon A happened because phenomenon B happened, is an understanding based not on the dynamics of the world machine as such, but based on the world view. So inference is a kind of chittavritti. So are dreams and so on. We'll get to that later. And one thing I wanted to point out is neither Buddhist traditions nor these yogic traditions are atheistic. Yogasutras are obviously not atheistic. It describes the idea of Ishvara. Ishvara meaning the wish granter, literally, which is God. But there's a difference from the Western idea of God. The Western idea of God is continuously engaged in creation. Often, at least the present day idea, this was denied by early Gnostics and Greek philosophers like Plotinus and all that. But I'm saying the general church idea is like the God is continuously a kind of, how do you say, a punisher, creator, in that kind of action, so to speak. But in the Eastern sense, of course the God has powers over all these realms of creation is not the word, all these realms. Creation is not the word because the awareness is continuously structuring reality within its own domain. Like if a person moves a book from point A to point B, the cause of that phenomenon is that awareness. Likewise, there are higher orders of awareness, and ultimately this world machine was structured by something, and it is staying independent of this phenomenon, and that is the beyond. The Gnostic traditions take the idea of the creator of this as evil, so to speak, because there's a lot of suffering. But the one who is beyond is incorruptible, is pure. That was the original Christianity. You can try reading the Apocryphon of John, the poem, The Inexpressible One. So that were the thesis of the early Christians. Apocryphon of John was a highly respected text in ancient Christianity, including with the church, early church. Nagarjuna offers an argument, something of this sort, against the idea, the simplistic idea of a creator. Suppose this creator is like a seed producing a plant. In the forming of the plant, the seed gets destroyed, or it does not get destroyed. If it gets destroyed, then the creator is not eternal. If it does not get destroyed, the creator itself is transforming with the creation. So it is not eternal. There's some higher creating power acting on it. It is victim to its own creation, so to speak. So there must be a higher creator, ad infinitum. So, ad infinitum could be thought of as a logical fallacy because you started with the assumption there's an absolute creator. Right? So this phenomenon, this mathematical machine which is led and scanning the DNA code, was structured perhaps by the one, so to speak, and the one is beyond this phenomenon. It is not affected by this phenomenon. It has powers over this phenomenon, and it has the power to free beings from this phenomenon, the sparks of awareness. And it is different from these sparks of awareness in the sense, according to Yogasutras, it is unobstructable by phenomenon of any plane. And it is not affected by things that affect beings. There's a definition given in the Yogasutras afterwards. It is not affected by karma, all those things. So, basically, the Yogasutras deal with a process needed to free the awareness from the world machine. What I've earlier described. In the process, one might gain powers over it and all that. And is it like some biblical authority on yoga? No, that is not the idea. It were an attempt during an era to preserve the ideas of a group of people, sages, or it were the knowledge system of an era. Like the way we gain knowledge is outward experiments, observation and all that. The way the ancients gained understanding, be it the Buddhist traditions or which are not two different traditions. Buddhists go into say the dhyana process, the meditation process, the focus and the analytical thing is there in both the traditions. The inner science appearing, it is there in both the traditions. The difference is the Buddhists go into a more lengthy analytical explanation of the process itself, while the Yoga Sutras are terse. It is dealing with the same topic. It cannot be that people discover two different realities. It is only the academia that thinks this thing is this way, that thing is that way, and they are dealing with two different things while meditating and trying to directly understand the universe. Buddhism is not about a lot of kindness, pacifism, or anything. There's in the Wikipedia article on the Brahma Viharas, which are like these things, loving kindness and all that. Buddha says their path, which involves the four immeasurables, does not lead to nirvana and all that. There's a quote from the original Pali text. But what Buddha has taught what Buddha, as per my understanding, what he taught, the core aspect were the jhana process, which is the meditation process that leads into the direct understanding. Zen, for instance, does not go too much into the text. The Buddhist teachings describe the texts themselves just as pointers. a pointer to the moon, right? Do not confuse the moon with the finger pointing at it. What the moon is has to be understood by observing the moon directly. Same way, the yogic process is same. It is not a bunch of theory or a philosophy to be believed in. Through the process, one frees the awareness, understands what is there, measure. If it is a true understanding, it will explain all phenomena, so to speak. Um, it is possible to explain the world phenomenon in terms of cycles of scan and the world DNA code. We observe that in the human system. Right? The system is continually, in a layered hyperbundled sense, scanning DNA, and we are seeing those scan cycles as our cellular structures and all that. The sixth cycle might be a view of the sixth cycle in the inner sense and the outer sense, which is the sixth chakra cycle, the sun cycle. The sun is a six-dimensional entity in that sense. A surface layer of scan or spin of which appears as the earth, and which the earth has its own DNA, its own awareness. So does the human, which is why the ancient Upanishadic and all those texts say the God in the eye of the sun, the eye of the earth, the eye of the human, they are the same. And that is the supreme God. Again, the eye means the center point, 0 point. It leads back to the Shunyata idea of the Buddhists. Nagarjuna says, Buddha has said that those who understand Shunyata understand things, right? But those who believe in Shunyata are lost. Because Shunyata is the layered Shunyatas. This is the mathematical structure of the world machine. And the reality is found by exiting from it. So it is not a theistic, it is not an atheistic tradition. The Buddhist tradition says the Buddha had acknowledged all those ancient Vedic sages. It is said in one of the sutras that Buddha spent a retreat studying the Vedas after enlightenment. One skeptic asked, if Buddha is omniscient, why did he need to study? Why did he spend a retreat studying the Vedas? So, to that and a series of other questions, a monk replies, that is only like revisiting what one already knows. Just like you might ask a friend how you're doing, even if you know how the friend is doing. So, and it might be to set an example too. The Vedic language is different. It can only be understood once a direct understanding arises. It is not just surface language, so to speak. The surface thing is there, but it is not in the deeper sense to be understood as just the surface language. It is definitely not a set of guidelines or anything like the Bible or anything. I think that is obvious too. And the language itself cannot be understood just in terms of the dictionary meanings of the words. In fact, it is entirely different in meaning, some of the words. This is just not me saying it. There has been discussion along the lines by Aurobindo. Those people. One has to go beyond and understand the Vedic text in terms of the movement of the world machine itself. And that is why these Vedic phrases are described as giving powers over the world machine. Like they could make a weapon with a mantra. No matter how many times a person sits and says that mantra, that is not going to happen. No matter what meaning they attribute to it, that is not going to happen. if you understand that movement as the movement of the world machine and understand the way to gain awareness over that movement and thereby hold that movement, then you have that power over the world machine. Which is why the Vedas can be used to gain superpowers, so to speak. That's everywhere in the Mahabharata. They are making all those weapons with the Vedas, they are healing themselves with the Vedas. And definitely not in a ritualistic sense, definitely not by repeating the mantras over and over again or anything. They gain awareness of that ability and then they can wield it at will. They don't need to recourse back to saying the mantra again and perhaps to amplify it. But generally, my understanding, my sense is no, they do not need to. They have that ability. It is in their awareness already. Like Arjuna could make weapons at will, not by chanting the Vedas. It by used in the formation of the weapons. Not just weapons, there are different abilities like shifting timelines, things of the sort. You see, the outward technology was were a way of amplifying this inner ability in those times. Tech even now is leaning into awareness controlled tech. It interacts with your thought that way, but what I'm describing is something different. Okay, that's it for this talk. I've discussed the first 3 sutras. I'll go 3 sutras at a time. There is just like 150 something sutras. So other yoga anushasanam means now the discussion of yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha means yoga is the stilling of the cycles of chitta. Chitta has been translated as mind. It is the layered DNA vectors. The layered cycles happening. Of course, the cycles themselves are not stopped in the entire universe, but the awareness withdraws from it in own space. The awareness is stilled from its impressions, so to speak. One person being in that yoga state won't make the universe disappear. So that is the chitta vritti of the universe is happening again and again. Still happening. Chitta, the mind and the universe. Chitta is often translated as the mind. The mind and the outer universe are not two different things. The individual mind or the individual view of the universe is a map of the world through own DNA lens, own DNA space. You can only see it through in the human experience, in the mortal experience. You can only see it through own DNA map. What own DNA map does not allow, or what own DNA subset of the world DNA does not allow, you cannot observe. If action is to be thought of as a kind of observation, you cannot fly unless you have wings or some other abilities. With superpowers it is a bit different, but still one is gaining access to something else, something more than just the sufferer's DNA. And the third sentence says, Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. In that way the observer is situated in own form. This own form idea is beyond the world DNA scan generated idea, but one does not disassociate with the body form entirely, because the body form needs to be held, but the own form in the purest sense of the term is what is not the world DNA scan. If you are playing a video game, the own form is what is not the video game phenomenon, what you are seeing in that virtual reality headset. So by stilling the world scan awareness, one situates oneself in own form awareness, what one actually is. It cannot die when the phenomenon in the virtual reality headset says the player died. So it is not actually, it need not be in any form of suffering in a theoretical sense when whatever the phenomenon in that virtual reality headset might be, unless it somehow began to think that form is, that outward form is own form. You see the difference in the way the Heart Sutra would describe it. The outer form is devoid of soul or self. There is no self in that. It's just what is viewed, it's just what is heard, nothing beyond. Again, one cannot get into a nihilistic understanding. Just like one cannot say the door is just what is viewed, so nothing will happen if you put a finger in between a closing door. You're going to hurt yourself because it is just so much strength the individual awareness has. Nobody can play Neo. If somebody is shooting a bullet at you, you cannot play Neo unless you are Neo or, or have somehow trained yourself into that state. Again, you see the analogy, right? The Matrix, understanding Matrix phenomenon. The movie The Matrix has drawn heavily from Eastern traditions. Once you understand the world phenomenon, you can die in the Matrix, you can go through that process. If you end up believing that what you see is the soul, right? Again, you still won't die, but you're subject to the phenomenon more. Okay, that is about it. The next few phrases go on to enumerate the world phenomenon experience into a few categories, and definitions are given to each of those categories or labels. But this core idea is what is the most important, what I just described now. In what I just said is what is the soul and what is not the soul. Whether it is broken down into a set of categories, given labels, definitions and all, it's just moot. Again, this is not like a biblical text what one follows, right? Once you gain a direct understanding of things, you do not need the text. You can, just like once you have an understanding of physics, you do not need to go back into the textbook, so to speak. You know why, right? You can rephrase it in your own words. It's the same way. It is the same role that a text plays. This is not the stuff of our religion versus another religion or anything like that. It is about understanding reality, measuring it against own observation. Observation is a form of experience. Experience and experiment is the foundation of Western science as well, right? Experiment means experiment. Ment is for mind. And in this process, we are dealing with an inner layer of the inner, not a inner layer. We are dealing with the ability of the awareness to view what is inside as well, just as it has the ability to view phenomenon outside, make accurate measurements and arrive at models of reality. It has the ability to view it inside and understand it directly. And that understanding, if it is right, has to explain the outward phenomenon as well. So if somebody understands yoga, so to speak, he should be able to explain all world phenomena. Those who claim to understand Yogasutras, they'd be, you know, right, if they actually understood the process, they should be able to take the process, they should be able to understand the world, do what uh, that process allows one to do, or do what that understanding allows one to do. Well, that's about it.